Welcome, and thank you everybody for joining us here today for the Climate Center and Clean Power Exchanges webinar, CCAs and the COVID-19 pandemic impacts and responses. Thank you so much for joining us, and a heartfelt thank you to our two panelists, Girish Balachandran and Nick Chaset. Hope everyone is doing well out there and comfortable wherever you are. Let's see. Oops. So your webinar team today is myself, Woody Hastings, Energy Program Manager with Climate Center, and Nina Turner, our Energy Program Associate. Nina will be helping us out with the Q&A later on in the webinar. Just a few housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded and it will be shared with all of the participants. I see many participants logging in right now. That's great. Thanks for joining us, folks. Thanks for being on time. So we've got everyone in listen-only mode throughout the entire webinar. Please use the Q&A entry panel, the Q&A, not the chat, for questions. And we will save the last 10 or 15 minutes of the webinar for questions and answers. Feel free to enter comments if you wish in the chat area. Our webinar today is being sponsored by Calpine. Thank you very much to Calpine. Calpine Energy Solutions is the premier provider of data management and customer contact center services for community choice agencies in California. For the past decade, they have been the trusted partner for the CCA community, serving 17 different operating CCAs and managing customer data for over 3.5 million meters across the state. Calpine Energy Solutions and class back office support services help guide CCA clients from initial launch through mass enrollment phases and beyond. This, combined with years of billing experience, electronic data interchange experience, customized implementation planning, and robust management, enable Calpine's CCA clients to be successful and achieve their long-term mission. I also want to put out a little sort of promo for one of our newest initiatives, the Climate Safe California campaign. The Climate Safe California campaign is initiated to bring us the policy decisions that we need to achieve by 2022 in order to have a state that is doing its part to be on track per the science, abiding by the science in terms of what's needed to address the climate crisis. So this is a campaign. You can see the URL there, theclimatecenter.org/climatesafeca. That's where you can read the entire platform and endorse it if you like what you see. So please check that out. And what it says here is that community choice is a key means, a key tool for achieving our greenhouse gas reduction goals. So what we're here talking about today, really in a nutshell, is how community choice agencies respond to community needs. And this first really sort of crystallized for me in 2017 after the wildfire episode, the Tubbs fire in Sonoma County. Big tragedy and lots of loss, lots of homes destroyed. And Sonoma Clean Power, when I was involved in helping lead the effort to get Sonoma Clean Power up and running between 2010 and 2014, we talked about choice and local control and more renewables, but we didn't tell people, create a CCA because you're going to be able to respond to any kind of calamity that comes your way. And so what we saw in 2017 and in 2018 was that Sonoma Clean Power quickly went about to spearhead the formation of a program to respond to this crisis and create a program that provides funding for folks to rebuild their homes safer, cleaner, more energy efficient, more resilient, up to, for all electric homes with solar and batteries, $17,500. And now with the COVID crisis, we're seeing The CCAs step up all across the state. About 21 or now 22 altogether operating in the state. The Clean Power Alliance, the LA County and Ventura County, and about 30 cities down there in Southern California. $1 million in bill assistance. I'm going to go through these pretty quick so that we can get to our presenters. Yeah, so Clean Power Alliance and then MCE, the state's first CCA that launched in 2010, has allocated $6 million to new resiliency efforts, focusing on lower income folks and communities of concern in that area. I'll leave the East Bay community energy discussion to Nick. I will just say that there was some late breaking news today on some new programs, so hopefully Nick can touch on that too. Monterey Bay Community Power is offering bill discounts through May and June, deferring those payments to the tune of about $22.4 million. Peninsula Clean Energy has approved a $100 bill credit for their Clara customers, the low-income eligible customers in that area, applied to their bills in April. San Jose Clean Energy is working with local organizations to secure funding for those most in need, lots of folks losing their jobs and folks that were disadvantaged to begin with. Again, I'll leave Silicon Valley Clean Energy to Girish, who will be first up. And Sonoma Clean Power and Valley Clean Energy have been making donations to their local, to some local community-based organizations. So I think with that, I will go to I will stop my screen share, and Girish, if you're ready to go, I'm stopping my share. And if you wanna go ahead and share your screen, I will happily hand it off to Girish, who will take it from here.
Thanks, Woody. Let me share the screen. Awesome. So far, the technology is working as practiced.
As planned.
Yes. So I'll go through a little quick background of SVCE. Here's our mission statement, and we were formed by 13 agencies. In Santa Clara County, we are one of 2 CCAs and 2 municipal agencies. So we are one of the 2 CCAs, and San Jose Clean Energy being the other one. In terms of community and industry impact, here's a high-level kind of snapshot. We have about 270,000 households and businesses receiving clean electricity from 100% carbon-free sources. And we are offering, our rates are 4% less than PG&E's equivalent generation rate. Our community has saved about $53 million from SVC's start. And essentially, we are reinvesting revenues into the local community. And that's what allows us, both from a local control perspective, but also allows us to be more responsive to opportunities and kind of threats like where we are right now with COVID and how we can respond in a tailored way. The bottom bullet here is just says we have committed to close to $1 billion for long-term renewables, solar storage, and geothermal contracts. And we'll continue to be investing in these resources in the years to come. So before I get to the actual programs that we are offering up to our customers on COVID relief, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how it's impacting our agency as a whole. From a load standpoint, our load so far has decreased, very similar to what you've seen in California-wide. It's somewhere around the 10% number, with residential load going up and small commercial and industrial load going down. And we are forecasting what the impacts would be for the next few years. And it's tough to forecast that, but we do know there will be an impact. We are expecting that impact to last between about 1 to 2 years before we get back to a certain normal demand shape. On the revenue side, we are budgeting for additional write-offs. Every CCA in the state and every utility in the state has stopped turning customers back to PG&E or stopping disconnects. And that does result in some financial issues for us. Fortunately, we have very strong reserves, and um, that's allowing us to go through these rough seas right now. On the power supply side, we continue to monitor the market. Market prices have gone down. That'll impact us on the PCIA. It's a different webinar, PCIA. But also looking at our long-term renewable contracts that are in the development pipeline. We are also in the process of, we just put out another RFP for new renewables. So far, no delays, and that's moving forward as planned. Lastly, on the staffing side, we continue to be just pretty surprised with all of us working from home. Our productivity, if anything, I'd say people are busier and working harder, so we continue to develop programs, power supply, legislative and regulatory advocacy. So pivoting now to the programs itself, when we were thinking about what kinds of programs we wanted to offer to help customers with COVID relief, we were balancing multiple goals. We were looking at, hey, when we offer relief, could it be mission aligned? Is there some aspects, are there aspects that could be of longer term value? And at the same time, we needed to balance this with speed. People wanted relief, and our board wanted relief to customers right now. So we call our program the CRCR program, Customer Relief and Community Resiliency. And our board set aside $10 million. And these were the 4 different areas that we were focusing on. One was care fairer customers, similar to what Woody started off with. It's this essentially looking at low-income customers. We also are looking at small businesses, the contractor workforce, which was also impacted, but looking at the contractor workforce that's more aligned with our mission, and our member communities through energy resiliency programs. Because we know that PSPS events are coming this summer, and we wanted to invest in getting our communities and their facilities, their critical facilities, more prepared for PSPS events. So here's a summary of the 3 basic program areas and the 6 programs that we are offering. So we have the customer, and I have a slide for each one of these. So this is just a snapshot. Here's how the $10 million is allocated. About $3.5 million for customer relief, about $1.5 million for workforce relief, and half for community resiliency. So I'll go through each one of these programs. On the customer relief side, the objective was to provide immediate relief to residential populations and also to the small business community. So on the residential side, this is very similar to what Peninsula Clean Energy is proposing or has actually implemented. And just today, letters have started going out to our customers where care and fairer customers will get a $50 bill credit for the next 2 months. Small businesses, we are going to send letters out to about 10,000 of our small businesses, and we kind of filtered the small businesses who would be eligible for this program to be those who have 1 or 2 accounts, and they'll be eligible for a $250 bill credit. They're going to have to apply for it, but the application process is extremely simple, and we expect about 4,000 of them to apply. That's what we budgeted for. But we've also maintained a contingency fund such that if there are more than 4,000 applicants, we should have money to satisfy that demand too. So that's $3.5 million that's focused towards small businesses and low-income customers. So I'll move on to our next major area, which is workforce relief. Here are the objectives that we had for our workforce relief programs. And describe this first program. So the workforce relief programs are the ones that, well, we're spending quite a bit of time on it. So this program on contractor training, it's essentially, we are designing a 6R module for electrification technologies. And we are targeting about 1,000 contractors to take this self-paced. A portion of the training is going to be asynchronous. A portion will be synchronous, wherein we'll actually have some live training. And if a contractor completes the 6 hours of training, we'll provide them a $500 check. And we are partnering with several folks. We actually have folks doing the video. We have some folks who are doing the online content training. We have someone who in her past life did like many documentaries and lots of media stuff. She essentially is for helping us out a lot in terms of the production value, so to speak, and making sure that we are providing training that would really be compelling to the audience that we're looking at. We're also partnering through a local community college and using the platform that they use to deliver online courses. So we have all the contracts in place, and our goal is the first $500 check will be cut by the end of June. We'll hope to start marketing this by the end of May, beginning of June, but the first week or so of June, we'll start marketing it. And we are looking at about 1,000 folks starting in our service area. And if we don't get enough of response, we'll start moving out to neighboring counties also. The second piece so the first program I just talked about, we hope to wrap that up by about July or so. And the second part of this program is a subset of the contractors who complete this training. We're going to offer them up to a $3,000 incentive for them to install batteries, heat pump water heaters, electric stovetops, and EV chargers in their workplace. And the idea is not just to reduce emissions, but it's to have those who, it's a high leverage point, right? So to the extent that we have plumbers and electricians who could install these decarb technologies in their own homes, that would be the best advertisement for us in our decarb program efforts too. So this program is going to go on through about March or April of next year. So the last program is our community resilience program, and we have two pieces to community resilience, and the objectives are about, it's kind of looking at the PSPS events, and we have some additional objectives here also listed on this slide. So the first part of the program is related to planning. So we've set aside $1 million for planning grants, and a portion of it is going to be a regional getting a study to do some regional planning. And then additionally, we'll also have a grant program that each city can use for their own resilience planning. We've given this an extended timeline through the end of 2021 for our cities to utilize this money. The last piece of our programs are $4 million allocated by load ratio share, basically the size of our agencies, for capital support for what they've identified in the planning stage, which I just talked about in the previous program. If they already have a plan, they can use their planning dollars for capital also. And the timeline for them to utilize this is December 2022. So to kind of summarize, we have 3 basic, areas and 6 programs, and the money will start going out. Literally, the first letters for the low-income customers have started going out today, right up to this program through December 2022. So it's a little more 2.5 years worth. And we've set aside contingency funds of $2 million. So depending on what the demand is for our online contractor training or the small business program, we'll make some changes as needed. That's the end of my presentation. So I will stop sharing and
Well, thank
hand it
you.
back to you.
Thank you very much, Girish. Very good, lot of stuff there. Couple things. First, I want to apologize if there's any difficulty. It seemed like Girish came through loud and clear. I heard that I might be coming through a little muddled. Sometimes I have a suboptimal internet connection here. So apologies for that. Also, just wanted to remind folks to please go ahead and if you have questions for Girish, enter those in, go ahead and enter those in the Q&A, not the chat, but in the Q&A now or at any time. There we go. And you should all see, Nick, can you see your slides there now? Should be your slides up on the screen.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay. So take it away, Nick. Nick Chaset, CEO of East Bay Community Energy.
Thank you, Woody, and thank you everyone out there in the world who's joining us today. Girish touched on a lot of the market trends and the load trends. So, you know, I'll just say we're experiencing the same sort of effects. We're actually in the process of setting our budget for the next year, and so one of our big challenges is how do we account for lots of uncertainty, load uncertainty. You know, there's a scenario where we see persistent 5-6% reductions in load, but there's a scenario where we see load increase because businesses are starting to open up, but people are still by and large staying home. So you have kind of a double air conditioning whammy where you have office buildings have their AC on, factories or shops are all open, but people are at home also running the AC because, you know, there are more people working from home. So it's in that sort of time of lots of uncertainty where I think we for one have taken a very conservative approach to our finances over the last couple of years, and so we feel good that we're in a strong position. And I think that's generally the theme you're going to hear from a lot of CCAs, that you know, we've been operating in the way we've been operating, you know, just to prepare ourselves for, you know, these challenging times that we're in. Please, first slide. So you know, when we saw the economic effects starting to take hold of COVID, you know, one of the things we immediately wanted to do was to see, is there a way we can immediately inject some funds into the community to support relief efforts? So we identified about $1.5 million of funds that were earmarked for some energy efficiency programs, for some marketing and outreach work that were likely to be impacted by COVID. One of the examples, you know, we were going to run a $300,000 incentive program for to demonstrate induction cooking in restaurants. Well, most restaurants are closed, so we didn't see an immediate opportunity to deploy those funds. So we went to our board and we sought to redirect these $1.5 million immediately to support community relief. We allocated the funds kind of in 4 different ways, which kind of I'll get into some details around on the next slide. But you know, I think we view this as sort of the first step in our relief. You know, we wanted to make sure there were some dollars out there to support, you know, the most needy organizations. And, you know, now we're starting to think about kind of what is our long run strategies to support Alameda County. Part of that is just making sure we can continue to offer lower cost energy than what people might otherwise be able to get from PG&E. Part of that is continuing to invest in clean energy projects and infrastructure to continue to try to create jobs. in Alameda County and in California more broadly. And also find ways that we can pursue other kind of interesting energy innovations. One thing that we don't have listed here is, because it's not specifically a COVID relief response, but did occur to me, I wish I put in my slides, is an initiative that I'm actually working on with Girish and Peninsula Clean Energy. And that is a program where we are partnering with solar installers to deploy solar and storage across the Bay Area. That solar and storage is going to be providing customer backup during PSPS events, and also going to be providing resource adequacy for the CCA. So it's helping us avoid having to rely on natural gas, and it's helping the customers with clean backup, as the grid is unfortunately becoming less and less reliable. So I think that's just another kind of initiative that I think is all the more important now that we're facing the COVID-19 crisis as well, that we're continuing to move ahead with that work. So Woody, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so the first kind of element of our response are a set of grants we've made to each one of our member jurisdictions. So we have 12 members currently. We actually have 3 new members that have just joined, but we don't yet serve. But our 12 core members, we are allocating $1.1 million to their specific relief efforts. So in some cases, cities have set up their own relief funds. And so we gave to those funds, and in some cases, like the city of Livermore, they actually had 3 community-based organizations that they wanted us to make grants to, and so we've done that. But really, what it is it's making funds available to each one of our communities to sort of put to the most effective use that they've identified. So it could be rental assistance, like we've seen in Emeryville. We're actually working with 2 cities potentially to fund testing for municipal workers. So I think that's been something that has been a real hit with our members, because they're all scrambling to figure out how they're going to pay for all these new expenses. And this has been sort of a nice injection of support when it's needed most. So next slide. We then felt like it was really important to support some of our medical institutions and help them cover the incremental costs of personal protective equipment. So we allocated $110,000 in grants that have been made, and we're still working to make for the purchase of this equipment. And so that has been something that we're really happy about, to sort of help support and protect our frontline workers and first responders. Next slide, please. In line with our own direct grants, we felt like it was really important to find ways to create leverage with our partners. So we initiated a campaign of reaching out to some of our largest customers and some of our energy and service partners to seek matching donations to the Alameda County Food Bank and Meals on Wheels. And so over the course of about 2 weeks, we were able to secure over $100,000 on top of the $70,000 that EBCE committed to, a total over $180,000 to Meals on Wheels and the food bank. That's thousands of meals that we've been able to help support for people who need it most. Next slide, please. Then, we also have found that we have a lot of community-based organizations that are working at very small, medium, or even large scale to do a variety of support initiatives for lots of different communities across Alameda County. And so we took $220,000 and we issued a solicitation, and through that solicitation, we received, I believe, in excess of 100 applicants for these grants. And through that competitive process, we selected an initial 22 grant recipients for $10,000 grants. So this is a list of some of those recipients here. And then next slide, finally, and this is something we're really excited to have announced today, is a partnership with Clearway Energy. So Clearway Energy is one of the providers of utility scale solar to East Bay Community Energy. We signed a power purchase agreement with Clearway Energy for a project that is going to come online in 2021. We signed it in 2019. And when we signed that agreement, actually when we signed all of our power purchase agreements, we have included community benefit funds. It's actually quite typical for solar and utility scale renewable projects to invest community benefit dollars in the places where the projects are being built. But because many of the projects we've signed, especially these large ones, are not, we're not able to build them in Alameda County, we wanted to make sure that there were some incremental community benefits coming home. And so we negotiated that as a term in the contract. And so in the case of Clearway, because it's a project that has a nearer term online date, we partnered with them to bring the funds forward. The funds would have otherwise have been made available sometime in 2021 when the project is fully completed. But Clearway, I recognized the challenges that Alameda County was facing and stepped up with a willingness to allocate $250,000 immediately. So those $250,000 are being used for three things. One is we are in the process of buying $50,000 in face masks and other personal protective equipment that we're going to be working with some of the community-based organizations listed here to distribute to residents of Alameda County and folks in Alameda County who are in need. And that might be frontline workers in places like grocery stores, or transit workers, or restaurant workers, folks who are out and about in the world, and we want to make sure that they have everything they need to be safe. $140,000 is being allocated in chunks of $5,000 to all the community organizations that are listed here. They're each getting a $5,000 grant as a result of this partnership with Clearway. And then finally, we're working with Clearway to allocate the final $60,000. I think we are focused on some more energy-oriented initiatives, whether that's bill relief, whether that's going to be energy efficiency education. I think we're trying to work through those details. Next slide. Oh, that's it. Well, there you go. That
might be it. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Nick, and thank you, Girish. Clearly, a lot of let's see, a lot of really excellent capacity building. Capacity to respond, capacity on the part of community choice agencies to respond to these crises. And, something I meant to point out earlier is, East Bay is just like what, a few days, a couple weeks short of your second birthday. You launched in June of 2018, and Silicon Valley just a little over a month, launched in April 2017, 3 years old. And the degree to which a community can rapidly build capacity to do all these kinds of things, it's just, it's really actually astonishing. So hopefully we've got some questions that Nina, you can help share some of the questions that have come in. And I think someone has, some folks have raised their hand. I've had some difficulty accessing some of the tools here. So if you want to pose a question, use the Q&A feature. It's the little sort of talk bubbles there, Q&A. Nina, do we have some questions?
Yes, a few. I'm going to start with the first one. For regional resilience planning, does SBCE have key projects in mind, maybe like microgrid planning?
Yeah, the way we are working it, we are going to allocate pretty much the bulk of the money to our cities to figure this out. But we are going to have qualifications on what they can use the money for. And microgrid planning would be a qualified expense. So the answer is yes, they could use it for that.
Okay, this next question I think can be applied to both of you. Are the CCAs open to looking at new platforms for data analytics, forecasting, and advice on how to lower costs from price volatility?
Open to it completely. I see that the question is from Lane Sharman. I'd invite you, Lane, to contact me directly. Girish at svcleanenergy.org. We can chat.
Go ahead, Nina. Unless, Nick, did you want to comment on that? I know you've got some heavy duty data analytics folks there on staff. So I know you're open to it.
Certainly I wouldn't say we're open to it. I mean, we're doing it. So it's not a matter of being open to it or not. I mean, I think that it's core to, everything we do from an operational perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, this next question to SBCE. How do you determine each agency receives the same amount of relief benefits or the same opportunities to the programs you've designed to support communities through COVID?
So the majority of the money, so the $5 million in planning for the resiliency side, for planning grants and capital expenditures, that's divided by the size of each agency, their electric load. So that's how we're making sure it's equitable. On the low income side, it's essentially the number of CARE and FERA customers. So that's going directly to customers. It doesn't go through cities. And for small businesses too, it's directly to those who have 1 or 2 accounts. So that's kind of like what I'd label programs 1 and 3. The second program, workforce relief, that's kind of it just depends on where contractors live. That's not really based on each agency. It's more service area wide. And then depending on what the response is, it can even go beyond our service area.
Okay, this next question is for both of you. What is the time frame for a deployment of DER resiliency programs that EBCE and SBCE are working on?
So we are looking to finalize our agreements over the next month or so, and our goal is to start active customer outreach this summer, and with the hope being for some of the small systems, the residential scale systems, potentially even be able to get some of those in place during this upcoming fire seasons. Certainly for larger scale systems, there's a lot more work related to things like interconnection and permitting. So our hope there is those are projects that will start coming online in 2021, 2022.
So Nick had mentioned, so this program that we are partnering with East Bay and with Peninsula, we are actually going to take the contracts to our board in June at the June board meeting. So we should be all set up at the same time. On the resilience programs that's coming out of the $10 million fund, the planning grants, we are asking that those monies be used by December 2021. and the capital expenses by December 2022. We started actually with these things being a year before those deadlines, but our board wanted us to extend the deadlines just because they may not have the bandwidth to actually do it. There's a lot of stuff going on in each of the cities. So it's December 21 and 22 for the resilience programs under the COVID relief side.
Yeah, and I'd like to just add a little bit, that the community choice agencies don't operate in a vacuum, and there's regulatory and legislative, a lot of regulatory and legislative activity on this front of, advancing, community energy resilience, DERs, and community microgrids and whatnot. So there's there's a proceeding at the CPUC right now that we're engaged in to try to get systems deployed quickly. We argue that local governments and particularly those with community choice agencies are particularly well positioned, well suited to really sort of take a take a robust role in advancing clean DERs. And then similarly in the legislature, although it's been quite a bit sort of stalled and hobbled by the pandemic, they have resumed, as most folks probably know, resumed the session earlier this month. And there are still some community energy resilience bills, 2 bills that the Climate Center had sponsored for this session. We were real excited to have 2 bills that we were helping to advance. Both of those had to be withdrawn. So, but there is a lot of activity in this sphere, and so just want to make that comment. Nina, other questions? And folks, feel free to continue to pose your questions in the Q&A box.
Okay, this next question is for Girish. If a school in your territory wants to install both solar and battery storage, would your resiliency provide funding for both DERs?
Yeah, short answer is yes. The way we are setting up this program is the funds go to the cities and the cities are actually going to implement it. So, but this would be an eligible expense under the resilience grant.
This next question is for both speakers. What are your thoughts on the COVID crisis colliding with the climate crisis?
Well, terrible. I don't know what to say. I think these are the kinds of unexpected crises that we would expect to be kind of result from the climate crisis. So unfortunately, I feel like what we're experiencing now to some degree is a representation of the new normal, and just highlights how important it is to invest in structures that can be responsive to crisis and can do so in a resilient way and in a community-oriented way.
So, this is a big question. I love the question. I don't know if all of us have really thought this through, but I'll just give you some thoughts, right? So obviously it's like, what this COVID crisis has shown is like we all network together. It's obvious, like we're networked. And that's what the climate crisis is also about. And so the need for a coordinated response, it's obvious with COVID, obvious with climate. So maybe there'll be those connections made even more strongly than in the past. I know everyone in this group who's listening to this webinar, that be preaching to the choir, but I'm talking about, more people kind of get the idea that, oh yeah, the climate crisis is actually a network problem. We all have to work on it. It's not just, it can't just be local. I'd say just randomly, the other thought that came to my mind here is also transportation, and just the fact that our staff, we have, close to about 30 people working. We're all working from home. And there are lots of positives to working from home. And one of the positives is we don't have to drive. The air is cleaner. So I think the whole transportation sector and seeing how transportation and land use can work together. So we're actually talking to a couple of our board members about this as to, is there a role for SVCE in working on transportation and land use planning? So just kind of blue skying this and say, what if we are the telecommuting capital of the world? What does that do for land use planning? And so we're just starting this. So I think there are some opportunities on how we can, change the way we live and work and move that would help with basically bending this carbon curve.
I'll just add a little bit on behalf of the Climate Center. Folks are wondering, how we're doing. Certainly, some of our funders are impacted by the pandemic, and but the climate crisis does not go away, and it's still with us, and so we are managing well. We're able to navigate, and we're continuing our programs, and in fact planning to expand and continue pushing as hard as we can to address the climate crisis in a meaningful way. So again, just mentioning the Climate Safe California campaign, that's our flagship program right now, and so visit our website and check out that program. And so I think there are some lessons learned with the COVID crisis. There's some interesting sort of similarities with the two crises, and I think that I'm hopeful that we can perhaps learn some lessons and be able to start to realize that if we collectively work toward a common goal, we can achieve it. Other questions, Nina?
Yes. Santa Clara Board of Supervisors is talking about broadband as a utility. Would that be a program for CCAs to reduce greenhouse gases from the commute, and how would it change how you look at expanding EV infrastructure? And this can be for both presenters.
So we have had some of our communities reach out to us about broadband. It's mostly been in the context of bridging the digital divide, though, and evaluating whether or not our Joint Powers Authority is set up to kind of leverage some of the capabilities we've built on the energy side to also consider providing broadband services. It's very early in those discussions, so I wouldn't see that happening anytime soon. But certainly, it's not uncommon for there to be municipal utilities that provide water and electricity and broadband. So worth thinking about more.
Well, I actually have relatively strong feelings on this because at one point in my career, I actually sold a telecom utility. I was working for the city of Alameda, and we had a telecom utility, and it was hemorrhaging money. And I think it's a very tough business to get into. There may be some aspects of it we can get into, but the regulations are very different. It's not like the energy space where there's lots of local oversight from the PUC and the state legislature. This is quite different, and the technology changes very rapidly. So unless we have some kind of legislation like what created like AB 117 and further legislation that kind of created a, mostly sustainable model for CCAs, if we can do something like that in the telecom side, I would not recommend us doing that. So. And right now we have our hands full with just the energy side. And I think there've been a lot of questions that have come in, and I think there's one coming on data analytics. How can we actually do a lot more to fill the gaps that the IOUs are not filling, and being more locally focused? I think we have we have pretty new. Nick's 2 years old, we are 3 years old. So I think it's going to take some time, I think, for us to really get up that maturity curve, even with the carbon reduction goals that we have.
Nina?
Okay, this next question. The next question is, how has the COVID-19 experience created new data streams or data priorities for CCAs? Are we close to building urban metabolism models for predictive?
Urban what models?
Oh, God. I said
Metabolism.
metabolism, huh?
That's what I thought I heard. Urban metabolism models. Okay.
So you know, I think what certainly in our case, you know, we have been looking to implement for things like load forecasting. We have been looking to implement machine learning techniques to be able to help ingest huge data streams and make sense. One of the challenges we're facing is that the effects of COVID are so dynamic and changing. It's hard to take historic data and then feed the algorithm to be able to give you sort of accurate predictions of the future. You know, part of that is having to do with it's, you know, what is the county going to say about shelter in place requirements? That's going to, you know, have a highly impactful effect on how consumers use energy. But you know, we're certainly trying to build in as much capacity as we can. One of the things that I'll just sort of note that we noticed about some of the early predictions around customer consumption changes. There was a lot of analysis early saying, oh, look at how electricity usage has changed in the first few weeks of the shelter in place. Much of that analysis was not normalized for weather. So it was overstating the reductions. We actually had a mild end of March. So when you normalized it for weather, the changes were not as significant. And I think we're actually now seeing kind of more typical weather here in May, and some of the load changes are reverting back to the sort of the normal range. So you start to ask yourself, is it really the change in behavior, or is it some change of behavior, but it's also sort of these weather patterns, which, you know, in general, weather is the driver of how much energy people use, at least in the short term.
So, by the way, I don't understand what urban metabolism means.
I'm so glad you're saying that, Girish, because I don't even.
But I would love the speaker, the person who had that question, please call me. It sounds really good, but from what I get out of it, it may be we're talking about the same thing, you're just using different words. You know, so today, this whole data infrastructure, the data ecosystem on the energy side is so archaic and so tough to actually get value out of, that as CCAs, whether we're working with the sponsor of this webinar, and the sponsor is Calpine, or, you know, Nick's group has done some amazing work on the data side. I think they're kind of leading up on the state and CCAs when it comes to data. We just got a position approved, senior data engineer, that we are going to have to kind of architect the data we have. We're working with some companies who are ex-Google folks on creating databases that we can use to get some more targeted kind of programs to our customers. But I kind of think that's all kind of optimizing really on the edges in a very, very archaic system. But that's what we have with the PUC and the IOU and the regulation we have. It's pretty pitiful. I think going forward, and this is my soapbox, if we want to get something different, I'm not sure that IOUs should be in charge of metering and billing. You know, maybe we should have a different kind of company that's in charge of metering and billing, that's kind of open access, public benefit, that gets that data out for our needs, the IOU needs, third-party needs. I think maybe that's where this term, when you talk about urban metabolism, I kind of think of that. So we're working through the legislative side. There was a bill introduced by Cal CCA and San Jose Clean Energy on more data transparency. But that had to do with a specific kind of need on our PCIA costs. There are lots of black boxes that we have in our business right now. And yeah, there's a lot of need for data engineering, et cetera, but yeah, it's all around the edges right now.
Thank you. So we're down to roughly our last 5 minutes. And so Nina, are there questions that are specific to anything, the presentations? Let's try to prioritize. I want to try to get to all the questions, but if there are any that are specific to what Nick or Girish actually presented, that would be great.
There isn't anything super specific, but one of the last questions is these programs that are being rolled out in response to COVID seem like they could have been implemented before COVID. So why are we rolling these out now, and why is it important to roll these out now?
Well, I'll start. Maybe I think we're just doing more of what we've started off with. So we do have programs we already had a program for resiliency, but we're doing more, and we've just allocated more of our budget for it. There's also some bandwidth issues in prioritizing. So we are 3 years old. So one of the things we looked at from the program side early on, about a year or so ago, was to invest our time on reach codes because there was a closing window of opportunity. The reach codes the building code gets updated once every 3 years. And if we missed that cycle, it was going to be another 3 years before we could do it. So we prioritized that, and of our 13 agencies, 9 have actually adopted reach codes. There are 3 more who are in the process of adopting it right now. That's it.
Well, actually, why don't we do this, since we're now down to about 4 minutes. Nick or Girish, would you like to offer any closing remarks? And before you start, either one of you, before you start, just for folks that still had questions in the queue, we will do our best to follow up and get all your questions answered. I don't think we've ever had a webinar where we were able to answer all the questions in the hour that we have. So we'll follow up and answer your questions. So any closing comments, either one of you?
I guess what I would just close by is, we really are led by the priorities of our local governments and our communities. And so I think if you're looking at the responses of our 2 CCAs, it's really driven by our priorities. Different CCAs may have different priorities. And so, that's going to lead to slightly different outcomes. But I think the power of the model is one where you really are leveraging kind of the financial capacity of being an electricity provider to respond to the needs at that time. And so I think that is just, reflection and sort of what's going on, and the focus on community investments immediately, focus on ongoing innovation and ongoing resiliency.
I'll just ditto that. I think it's exactly, I think Nick said it great. And one of the things I told my board when we were, pitching these programs is, let's set aside some money and monitor this situation, because it's gonna be a year or 2 at least before we get back to normal. And who knows what pathways we're gonna take in terms of this pandemic. Is it gonna be just 1 wave or 2 waves that are gonna come to us in fall? So we need to be prepared to make additional changes also. So I think the CCA model is very well suited for that. We're closer to our communities, and we're quite agile. And so I think we're able to provide more targeted and focused value than with the one-size-fits-all model that we used to live with many years ago.
Very good. Well, thank you both. And thanks again. I know you're both super busy people with a lot of pressure and stuff coming at you from all sides. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and make these excellent presentations and answer the questions. Just a few notes about some upcoming dates and reminders. First, the webinar recording will be sent to all of the registrants and attendees. We also post our webinars and associated materials The slide decks in PDF form will be posted at our Clean Power Exchange webinar page. We do have a series of community energy resilience webinars coming up, so check out the climatecenter.org CER Summit 2020 for that. The first one starts on June 10th, and so there will be a series of them, and culminating on August 5th with what yesterday would have been our event out at Sac State, a real world community energy resilience summit that we had planned. And so anyway, it's gone virtual, as so many of these things have. So check that out. And Lean Energy US is holding their next community choice market call on Friday, June 12th at 10 a.m. Always packed full of fantastic community choice related information and updates. So with that, Nina, was there anything else we needed to cover today?
I think you've got it.
Okay, well, thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day and stay safe and healthy out there, okay? I think, oh, and just my contact information if you need it. Okay, there we go. Bye-bye, all.